The birthday toast was already written. Robert Mitchell, 74 years old, affectionately known as Uncle Bob to 3 generations of Harrisons, stood in his backyard on Saturday afternoon, June 8, 2024, preparing for a family barbecue. His goddaughter Jessica Harrison was turning 40, and the entire extended family would be there. Mitchell had helped raise Jessica, attended her school plays, walked her down the aisle when her father's health failed. He'd written a toast about watching her grow from the baby he'd bounced on his knee to the mother of 3 she'd become. He would never deliver that toast. Because at exactly 2:47 p.m., 3 hours before the barbecue, Detective James Patterson stood at Mitchell's front door with a DNA match report connecting Mitchell to a hair strand found on Emily Carter's jacket 50 years earlier. Behind Patterson, 6 tactical officers waited in unmarked vehicles, preparing to arrest a man who'd spent 5 decades being Uncle Bob to the children whose babysitter he'd murdered. Mitchell answered the door in a Colorado Rockies cap and an apron that read, "World's Best Godfather," a Father's Day gift from Jessica 5 years ago. He saw Patterson's badge, the grim expression, the officers behind him. The apron suddenly felt like a costume, the cap like a disguise he'd worn for 50 years. "Robert Mitchell?" Patterson said. Mitchell's hands started trembling. He gripped the doorframe. "You're here about Emily Carter." It wasn't a question. It was a confession spoken on a June afternoon while ribs marinated in his kitchen, and children's laughter from a nearby playground reminded him of everything he'd stolen 50 years ago. Patterson's jaw tightened. "Robert Mitchell, you're under arrest for the murder of Emily Carter." Mitchell's legs buckled. He fell to his knees on the front porch, hands covering his face. "Oh God! Oh God, no, not today. Not on Jessica's birthday. Please, not today." Officers moved forward, helped him upright, secured handcuffs around wrists that had pushed children on swings, carved Halloween pumpkins, tied birthday balloons. As they searched his pockets, something fell out. A photograph, edges worn. Emily Carter, 18 years old, holding baby Jessica Harrison, June 1974. The last photo taken before Mitchell killed her. Patterson picked it up. "You've been carrying this for 50 years. Mitchell nodded, unable to speak through sobs. "I've been Uncle Bob for 50 years. I've watched those children grow up. Jessica, Tommy, Sarah. I was at their graduations, their weddings. I held their babies. And every single moment, I knew I'd killed the girl who should have been there with them, who should have watched them grow." Across the street, neighbors began gathering. The Johnsons, whose grandchildren Mitchell had taught to fish. The Rodriguez family, who Mitchell had helped during the 2013 floods. Mrs. Chen, whose husband's funeral Mitchell had attended just last month. They watched in confusion as their beloved Uncle Bob was led to a patrol car in handcuffs. Mrs. Johnson called out, "Bob? What's happening? Is this a mistake?" Mitchell stopped, looked at her, at the neighborhood where he'd lived for 50 years, at the people who'd trusted him with their most precious memories. "It's not a mistake, Margaret. I killed Emily Carter in 1974. I've been lying to all of you, to the Harrisons, to everyone. I'm so sorry." The confession rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Mrs. Johnson's legs gave out. Her husband caught her. And Mitchell watched the destruction of 50 years of trust, built barbecue by barbecue, birthday by birthday, one family moment at a time. As the patrol car door closed, Mitchell collapsed forward, forehead against the seat, and whispered, "Tell Jessica I'm sorry. Tell her Uncle Bob is sorry." By 3:30 p.m., Denver suburbs were waking to news that would shatter 50 years of trust. To understand how Robert Mitchell lived free for half a century, while Emily Carter's family waited for answers, you have to go back to a June night in 1974, when babysitters walked home alone and family friends were beyond suspicion. Emily Rose Carter was 18 years old on June 7, 1974, a recent high school graduate working as a babysitter while saving for nursing school at University of Colorado. She had auburn hair, freckles, and a laugh that made children adore her. She was the kind of babysitter every parent hoped for: reliable, responsible, caring. June 7th was a Friday. Emily was babysitting for the Harrison family. 3 children aged 6 months, Jessica, 3 years, Tommy, and 5 years, Sarah. The Harrisons had gone to a company dinner, expected home by 10:30 p.m. Emily had babysat for them dozens of times. The children loved her. Sarah called her Miss Emily. Tommy insisted on showing her his toy collection every visit. Baby Jessica would stop crying the moment Emily picked her up. The Harrisons returned home at 10:22 p.m. Emily had put all 3 children to bed. The house was clean. She'd prepared a bottle for Jessica's midnight feeding. Perfect, as always. Robert Mitchell, the Harrisons' neighbor and close friend, was visiting when they arrived home. He'd stopped by to drop off tools he'd borrowed from Mr. Harrison. "I'll drive Emily home," Mitchell offered. "It's dark. She shouldn't walk alone." The Harrisons accepted gratefully. Mitchell was Uncle Bob, trusted family friend. He'd been at their wedding, was designated godfather for Jessica, helped with home repairs. Baby Emily was perfectly safe with him. Or so they thought. Emily never made it home. At midnight, Emily's parents called the Harrisons. Emily wasn't home, hadn't called. The Harrisons called Mitchell immediately. He said he'd dropped Emily at her house at 10:45 p.m., watched her go inside, then driven home. Emily's parents checked. She'd never entered the house. By 1 a.m., police were searching. By 2 a.m., they'd found Emily's denim jacket at Bear Lake Park, a remote area 5 miles from her house, in the opposite direction from the route Mitchell claimed he'd taken. The jacket was torn. There were signs of struggle in the dirt nearby, but no Emily. Among the first responders, Robert Mitchell, offering to help search, to coordinate volunteers, to do whatever he could for the family he loved, the family whose babysitter he'd killed hours earlier. For David and Patricia Harrison, Emily's disappearance created a trauma that shaped their children's lives. Sarah, 5 years old when Emily vanished, developed separation anxiety that lasted into adulthood. Tommy, 3, had nightmares for years about the babysitter who never came back. Jessica, 6 months old, would never remember Emily, but grew up knowing she'd been named after the babysitter whose murder shadowed her childhood. Every June 7th, the Harrison family and Emily's parents held a vigil at Bear Lake Park, where Emily's jacket had been found. In early years, hundreds attended. Over time, crowds thinned. But one person attended every single vigil without fail: Robert Uncle Bob Mitchell. Mitchell became more than a family friend after Emily's disappearance. He became essential. He helped David Harrison cope with guilt about accepting Mitchell's offer to drive Emily home. He was there for every milestone: Sarah's first day of school, Tommy's Little League games, Jessica's baptism, where Mitchell served as godfather, birthday parties, graduations, weddings. At the 25th anniversary vigil in 1999, Mitchell stood beside David Harrison, now 52, watching Sarah, Tommy, and Jessica place flowers at the memorial plaque. "I still feel responsible," David said quietly. "I let Bob drive her home. If I'd driven her myself," Mitchell squeezed his shoulder. "You can't think that way. It wasn't your fault. Emily's killer is out there somewhere, but it wasn't your fault." David, tears in his eyes, looked at his closest friend. "Thank you for being here, Bob, for staying close to this family. Most people moved on. You never did." Mitchell couldn't meet his eyes, because staying close wasn't friendship. It was compulsion. It was watching the children Emily should have raised grow up without her. It was attending Jessica's milestones, her graduation, her wedding, the births of her children, knowing he was the reason Emily wasn't there beside her. In 2014, at the 40th anniversary vigil, Jessica Harrison, now 40, brought her 3 children to meet the man who'd been her godfather since birth. "Uncle Bob has been here for everything," Jessica told her children. "Weddings, births, everything. He's family." Mitchell held Jessica's youngest daughter, 2 years old, and felt the weight of 40 years crushing him. This child was Emily's goddaughter's child, 3 generations removed from the murder. And he was holding her, being trusted with her, while knowing he'd killed the young woman who should have been the one designated godmother. The breakthrough that would finally destroy Mitchell's 50-year lie began in 2022 when Boulder County Cold Case Unit received funding for advanced DNA analysis. Detective James Patterson was assigned to review the Carter case. Among preserved evidence, a single strand of hair found on Emily's jacket in 1974. In 1974, hair DNA was useless for identification, but in 2023, advanced extraction techniques could recover cells from hair shafts decades old. Patterson sent it to a private forensic lab. The lab recovered a partial DNA profile. It was entered into CODIS. No match. But in March 2024, they tried forensic genetic genealogy. The trail led to a family line with roots in Colorado and Kansas. 4 siblings born in the 1940s. 2 deceased. 1 living in Florida. 1 living in Denver suburbs. Retired contractor. Known to everyone as Uncle Bob. Robert Allen Mitchell. On May 20th, 2024, Patterson received the genealogy report. The name hit him like a physical blow. Robert Mitchell. The neighbor who'd offered to drive Emily home, who'd helped search for her, who'd attended vigils for 50 years, who was godfather to Jessica Harrison, the baby Emily had been babysitting the night she died. For the next 3 weeks, investigators tracked Mitchell, waiting to collect discarded DNA. On June 5th, Mitchell attended a neighborhood picnic. He threw away a plastic water bottle. Officers retrieved it, sent it for expedited analysis. On June 7th, results came back. Perfect match to the DNA from the hair strand on Emily Carter's jacket 50 years earlier. The arrest warrant was signed June 8th. On June 8th, 2024, at exactly 2:47 p.m., Detective Patterson approached Robert Mitchell's house. And when Mitchell fell to his knees, crying, "Not on Jessica's birthday," when officers found Emily's photo in his pocket, when he publicly confessed to Mrs. Johnson, Patterson knew they had their man. As the patrol car carrying Mitchell pulled away, the Harrison family was gathering at Jessica's house 3 miles away, waiting for Uncle Bob to arrive with his famous potato salad and the birthday toast he'd prepared. The toast he'd never deliver. The last family event he'd ever attend. Because Robert Mitchell, beloved Uncle Bob to 3 generations, was a murderer who'd hidden his crime for 50 years while attending birthdays and baptisms and weddings. And now, finally, Emily Carter's family would get answers they'd waited half a century to hear. The interrogation room at Colorado State Police headquarters felt like a confessional for sins too heavy to carry any longer. Gray concrete walls, single metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed like the buzz of cicadas on summer nights when children played outside, trusting the adults who watched them. No windows, no escape. Just Robert Uncle Bob Mitchell in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed to a steel ring embedded in the table, and Detective James Patterson sitting across from him with a folder containing 50 years of family photos, birthday cards, and lies. Mitchell had been in custody for 14 hours, booked, photographed, fingerprinted. The world's best Godfather apron had been logged as evidence. Now he sat, slumped in the chair, face pale, eyes hollow from crying, looking nothing like the man who'd carved pumpkins with children and taught them to ride bikes. Patterson let the silence stretch. 20 minutes. 30. 40. He'd learned that with family friends, the silence worked differently. They filled it with memories of birthdays they'd attended, graduations they'd witnessed, children they'd held. Let them remember what they'd stolen from everyone who trusted them. At 43 minutes, Mitchell broke. "I want to tell you where she is." His voice was hoarse, raw. "Emily. I want to bring her home. I've carried this for 50 years. Let me at least give her family that." Patterson opened the folder slowly, pulled out the DNA report, slid it across the table. "We already know you killed her. The hair strand on her jacket. Your DNA. Perfect match." Mitchell stared at the document, hands trembling. "One hair. After 50 years. I thought I'd been so careful. Wiped down the jacket before I left it at the lake. Made sure there was no blood. But one strand of my hair condemned me. Maybe that's God's way of saying, time's up. Tell me what happened to Emily Carter." The confession came slowly, like poison draining from a wound that had festered for half a century. "It started on June 7th, 1974, Mitchell said. He was 24, a contractor, recently divorced, living next door to the Harrison family. He'd known Emily for 2 years, had watched her babysit the Harrison children dozens of times, had developed feelings he knew were wrong but couldn't control. She was 18, beautiful, kind. The kids adored her. I told myself I was just being friendly, neighborly. But I was lying to myself. I was attracted to her. And that night, when the Harrisons came home and I offered to drive her, it wasn't kindness. It was opportunity." June 1974. Friday night. The Harrisons arrived home at 10:22 p.m. Emily had put the children to bed perfectly, as always. Mitchell offered to drive her home. Emily accepted, trusting Uncle Bob, the neighbor who'd helped her change a tire once, who brought cookies to the Harrison kids, who seemed safe. I drove her toward her house. Then I told her I needed to make a quick stop, to check on a construction site I was working on near Bear Lake. She said, "Okay." She trusted me. Why wouldn't she? I was Uncle Bob. The construction site was isolated, dark, no one around. Mitchell parked the truck, told Emily he'd realized over the past months that he had feelings for her, that he thought they had a connection. Emily's reaction was immediate and clear. She backed away, told him she was planning to start nursing school in the fall, that she saw him as a friend, nothing more, that she wanted to go home. I should have driven her home, should have apologized, should have been embarrassed and moved on. But I was angry, humiliated. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away, started to get out of the truck. I grabbed her jacket. She screamed. I put my hand over her mouth. She fought. God, she fought so hard. Scratched my face, bit my hand. I wrapped my hands around her neck, squeezed. She fought for maybe 2 minutes. Then she stopped. The room fell silent except for the fluorescent lights humming and Mitchell's ragged breathing. Patterson forced himself to remain professional when every instinct screamed to reach across the table and finish what Emily had started 50 years ago. "What did you do with her body?" Mitchell's voice dropped to barely audible. "There's an abandoned mine shaft in the mountains west of Bear Lake. Old silver mine from the 1800s. Boarded up but accessible if you know where to look. I'd done construction work in that area. Knew the mines existed. I wrapped Emily in a tarp from my truck, drove to the mine, carried her down the shaft. It drops about 40 feet before it levels out. I left her there, covered the entrance better, made it look untouched. Then I went back to Bear Lake, tore her jacket, left it where searchers would find it, made it look like she'd been attacked by a stranger." Patterson stood abruptly, walked to the corner, pressed his forehead against cold concrete. When he turned back, his voice was ice. Then you went home. And the next morning, when Emily's parents called looking for her, you helped search. You organized volunteers. You attended vigils for 50 years. You became godfather to Jessica Harrison, the baby Emily was babysitting. You attended that family's every milestone. Mitchell nodded, face buried in his cuffed hands. I couldn't leave. Moving away would have been suspicious. So I stayed. I became Uncle Bob. I was at Sarah's first day of kindergarten, Tommy's Little League games, Jessica's baptism. I told myself if I helped raise those children, if I was there for every moment Emily should have been there for, maybe somehow it would balance out. But it never did. Every birthday party, every graduation, I saw Emily's face. Knew she should have been there instead of me. Patterson pulled out evidence photos recovered from Mitchell's house that morning. When we searched your attic, we found something. Emily's babysitting notebook, the one she used to track her appointments. The last entry, dated June 7th, 1974, says, Harrison family, 6:10:30 p.m. Bob offered to drive me home. You kept it for 50 years. Mitchell looked at the photo, something breaking in his eyes. I took it from her purse after I killed her. I don't know why. Maybe as evidence of my guilt, maybe as penance. I hid it in my attic. Every year when I got Christmas decorations down, I saw that notebook, saw her handwriting. Bob offered to drive me home. The last thing she ever wrote, and it was about me. While Mitchell sat in the interrogation room confessing, a tactical team had searched his house. In the attic, buried in a box marked Old Tax Records, Detective Sarah Chen found a spiral notebook, pink cover. Emily's babysitting, written in teenage handwriting. Inside, dates, times, families. The last entry, in blue ink, read, June 7th, 1974, Harrison family, 6:10:30 p.m. $8. Bob offered to drive me home. Beneath the notebook, a newspaper clipping from June 1974. Local babysitter missing. A photo of Emily, and handwritten in the margin in Mitchell's handwriting. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry. I'll watch over them for you, I promise. Chen photographed everything, hands shaking. When she called Patterson with the discovery, her voice was barely controlled. He's been keeping her notebook for 50 years, with a note promising to watch over the Harrison children. He used her murder as justification for integrating himself into their family. Patterson showed the photos to Mitchell during interrogation. His reaction was immediate. He vomited into the trash can, then collapsed forward. I wrote that note the day after her funeral. Promised Emily I'd watch over Sarah, Tommy, and Jessica. That I'd be there for every moment she couldn't be. I thought if I kept that promise, maybe she'd forgive me. Maybe I'd forgive myself. But you can't atone for murder with birthday parties. You can't balance taking a life by attending graduations. The recovery operation at the abandoned mine shaft began at dawn on June 11th, 2024, guided by Mitchell's detailed confession. The site was in the Roosevelt National Forest, west of Bear Lake, area closed to public access during the search. Mine rescue specialists, forensic teams, structural engineers to assess shaft stability, and at the mine entrance, insisting on being present, stood David Harrison. Detective Patterson had called him 3 days earlier with news of Mitchell's arrest. David's reaction had been silence so complete, Patterson thought the call had dropped. Then, finally, Bob? Uncle Bob, the man who walked Jessica down the aisle, who held my grandchildren. Now David stood at the mine entrance, 77 years old, leaning heavily on a cane, his adult children beside him. Sarah, 55, who'd flown in from Seattle. Tommy, 53, from Denver. Jessica, 50, who'd canceled her birthday party the moment she learned why Uncle Bob hadn't shown up. Santos approached David. You don't have to be here. The mine shaft is dangerous. Recovery could take days. David shook his head, eyes fixed on the entrance. I let Bob drive her home. I've blamed myself for 50 years. I need to bring her home. I need to see this through. The mine rescue team entered the shaft at 8:17 a.m. The entrance had been reinforced over the decades, but once past the boards, the shaft dropped 40 feet into darkness. Rope systems, harnesses, helmet cameras streaming footage to monitors above. At 11:45 a.m., the team reached the bottom. At 12:23 p.m., they confirmed human remains, wrapped in deteriorated tarp, exactly where Mitchell had described. Recovery took 6 hours. When they finally brought Emily's remains to the surface at 6:38 p.m., David Harrison's legs gave out. His children caught him, held him, while he wept for the young woman he'd trusted Uncle Bob to protect 50 years ago. She was there the whole time, David gasped, in the mountains, in the dark, for 50 years. And Bob knew. He came to our house for Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthday parties. And he knew. Jessica stood apart from her father and siblings, staring at the mine entrance. He was my godfather, she whispered to Patterson. He walked me down the aisle when Dad's heart was bad. He held my children. And the whole time, he'd killed Emily. The whole time he was living a lie. The news exploded across Colorado, and then nationally. Beloved Uncle Bob arrested. Victim found in mine shaft after 50 years. Killer was godfather to baby she'd been babysitting. The story had everything that made true crime simultaneously compelling and horrifying. In Denver suburbs, the reaction was visceral and deeply personal. The Harrison family held a press conference on June 14th, all 3 siblings present. David too frail to speak, but insisting on being there. Sarah Harrison spoke first, voice shaking. Bob Mitchell was at my kindergarten graduation, my high school graduation, my wedding, my children's births. I called him Uncle Bob until I was 40 years old. Now I learn he killed Emily Carter, the babysitter I barely remember, but who shaped my childhood through her absence. How do you process that? How do you trust anyone again? Tommy Harrison followed. I had nightmares for years about the babysitter who disappeared. Uncle Bob would comfort me. Tell me Emily was with the angels. He knew exactly where she was. He put her there. And he used my trauma he caused, to get closer to our family. Jessica Harrison was last. She'd prepared notes but couldn't read them. Uncle Bob walked me down the aisle 3 years ago. I chose him because Dad's health was failing, and Uncle Bob had always been there. He gave a speech at my reception about watching me grow from a baby to a bride, about how Emily would have been proud. The whole room cried. And now I learn he killed Emily, that every moment he spent with my family was built on her murder. I don't know how to explain this to my children. How do I tell them their great godfather is a murderer? The neighborhood where Mitchell had lived for 50 years was in shock. Mrs. Johnson, who'd known him 30 years, gave an interview that went viral. Bob taught my grandchildren to fish, helped during the floods, was at every community event. If Bob Mitchell can be a murderer, then anyone can. How do you trust your neighbors after this? The Harrison family's church held a healing service. Hundreds attended. Pastor William Chen addressed the congregation. We are grappling with betrayal at the deepest level. A man we welcomed into our homes, trusted with our children, integrated into our families, was hiding murder. But we cannot let one man's evil destroy our community. We will heal. We will learn to trust again. But it will take time. Emily Carter's funeral was held on July 15, 2024, at Boulder Community Church. 50 years after her death, she was finally brought home. The church overflowed, some who'd known Emily, others who'd grown up hearing her story, all gathered to lay her to rest. David Harrison sat in the front pew, flanked by his children and grandchildren. He'd brought something with him, Emily's babysitting notebook, recovered from Mitchell's attic. The last thing she'd written. The last record of her trust in Uncle Bob. Pastor Michael Stevens delivered the eulogy with barely restrained anger. Emily was stolen twice. Once in 1974, when her life was taken by someone she trusted, and again every day for 50 years, when her killer integrated himself into the family she'd served, attending their milestones, playing the role of beloved uncle, while knowing he'd murdered their babysitter. Jessica spoke during the service, reading from notes she'd written at 3 a.m. that morning. I never knew Emily. I was 6 months old when she died, but I grew up with her absence. Every June 7th vigil, every time my parents' voices got quiet when someone mentioned babysitters, every time Uncle Bob told me I was special, that I was named after someone important. Now I know. I was named after the woman Uncle Bob murdered, and he watched me carry her name for 50 years without ever telling me the truth. The burial took place at Green Mountain Cemetery. Emily's casket was lowered beside her parents' graves. David placed the babysitting notebook on the casket. You wrote, "Bob offered to drive me home." You trusted him. We all trusted him. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry we didn't protect you. When mourners began filing away, the Harrison children remained, standing over Emily's grave in silence. Finally, Tommy spoke. We spent 50 years with Uncle Bob, 50 years of birthdays, holidays, graduations. Every single moment was a lie. Every hug, every gift, every "I'm proud of you" was from Emily's killer. How do we remember our childhoods now? How do we separate the good memories from the knowledge of what he'd done? No one had an answer, because there was no good answer. The past couldn't be rewritten. Uncle Bob couldn't be separated from Bob Mitchell, murderer. They were the same person. And that truth would haunt the Harrison family for whatever time remained. The trial of Robert Mitchell began on November 11th, 2024. Despite his detailed confession, Colorado law required formal proceedings. Mitchell's court-appointed attorney, Jennifer Walsh, faced an impossible task. The confession was voluntary. The DNA was irrefutable. The body had been recovered exactly where Mitchell described. Walsh's strategy focused on Mitchell's 50 years of genuine care for the Harrison family. The prosecution destroyed it systematically. Lead prosecutor Daniel Morrison was merciless. The defendant claims he cared about the Harrison family. Let's examine that claim. He murdered their babysitter. He integrated himself into their family, using that murder as justification. He attended 50 years of milestones Emily should have attended. He became godfather to Jessica Harrison, the baby Emily was babysitting when he killed her. He walked Jessica down the aisle. He held her children. All while keeping Emily's babysitting notebook in his attic, her final entry reading, "Bob offered to drive me home." That's not care. That's sustained psychological torture disguised as family love. The evidence was overwhelming. The DNA match, the confession video, the babysitting notebook with Mitchell's note promising to watch over the children, photos of the mine shaft where Emily had been hidden for 50 years. The most powerful testimony came from David Harrison, 77 years old, barely able to stand, voice shaking, but words devastating. Bob Mitchell was my closest friend for 50 years. I trusted him with my children, my grandchildren. He was at every important moment of our lives. And all that time, he'd killed Emily. I blamed myself for 50 years for letting Bob drive her home, had nightmares about it. And Bob comforted me, told me it wasn't my fault, knowing the entire time that it was his fault. He used my guilt he caused, to get closer to my family. David turned to face Mitchell directly. You walked Jessica down the aisle when my heart was failing. You gave a speech about how Emily would have been proud. The whole room cried. And you knew you'd killed Emily, used her name, used her memory, to make yourself look good. I will never forgive you for that. Never. The courtroom was silent. Mitchell sat at the defense table, head down, destroyed. When given opportunity to address the court, Mitchell stood. I have no defense. Emily rejected me, and I killed her. Then I spent 50 years being Uncle Bob, trying to be the person Emily would have been for that family. But you can't substitute yourself for someone you murdered. Every birthday party, every graduation, I saw Emily's face. Knew I'd stolen her future. But I kept going, kept attending, kept pretending. I kept her notebook. Her final words were about me, about trusting me. And I betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. I'm sorry doesn't erase 50 years. But it's all I have. Jessica stood from the gallery. Don't you dare say you were trying to be Emily for us. You were nothing like Emily. You were her killer pretending to be family. And we gave you 50 years of love you didn't deserve. Judge Patricia Morrison delivered the sentence on November 14th, 2024. Mr. Mitchell, you are sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. You took a life to hide your rejection. You let a family suffer for 50 years. You integrated yourself into their lives using murder as justification. You became godfather to your victim's charge. You will die behind bars. Court adjourned. Mitchell showed no reaction as officers led him away. The man who'd carved pumpkins with children and taught them to fish disappeared into the prison system, stripped of the Uncle Bob title he'd used to hide murder for half a century. Robert Mitchell died in prison on February 18, 2025, 8 months after his conviction. He was 74. The official cause was heart failure, though prison staff reported he'd been refusing medication for weeks. His final words to a chaplain: "Tell the Harrisons I never meant to hurt them. Tell Emily I'm sorry." The Harrison family was notified. Their response, issued through an attorney: "We have no comment on Robert Mitchell's death. Our focus is on honoring Emily Carter's memory." The neighborhood where Mitchell had lived for 50 years held no memorial. His house was sold within a month. The new owners knew nothing of its history. The community wanted to forget Uncle Bob had ever existed. Jessica Harrison created the Emily Carter Babysitter Safety Foundation in 2025. It provides training for babysitters about recognizing unsafe situations, teaches parents about proper vetting, and offers support for families dealing with similar tragedies. The foundation's motto: trust, but verify. Always. On the first anniversary of Emily's reburial, July 15, 2025, the Harrison family gathered at her grave. David had died peacefully in his sleep 2 months earlier, at 77, finally able to rest, knowing Emily had been found. His children brought their children, teaching them about the babysitter they'd never met, but whose memory shaped their family. Emily was 18 when she died, Sarah told her teenage daughter. Uncle Bob, the man you knew as great godfather until last year, killed her. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to teach you. Evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks like family. Sometimes it smiles and brings you birthday gifts and teaches you to ride bikes. Trust your instincts. And know that we will always believe you if something feels wrong. The Harrison children continue to process 50 years of memories, now tainted by truth. Birthday parties Uncle Bob attended, holidays he celebrated with them, weddings he participated in. All of it real, and all of it built on murder. They're learning that both things can be true simultaneously. That Uncle Bob was kind to them and killed Emily. That he genuinely cared about them and used their family to hide from justice. That life is more complicated than villain and hero. At Bear Lake Park, where Emily's jacket was found 50 years ago, there's now a memorial bench. The plaque reads, "Emily Rose Carter, 1956 to 1974. Beloved daughter. Trusted babysitter. Taken too soon. Found at last. May her memory protect others. Justice came late to Colorado, but it came, carried out of a mine shaft after 50 years in darkness. And the man who'd hidden her there, who'd played Uncle Bob while knowing where she was, died in a prison cell 8 months after being caught. The Harrison family will carry the weight of that betrayal for whatever time remains. But they'll also carry Emily's memory forward, teaching young people to trust carefully, to verify thoroughly, and to know that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the safest. And in the mountains west of Bear Lake, the abandoned mine shaft where Emily spent 50 years has been permanently sealed. A small marker identifies it as her recovery site, not where she died, where she was hidden, where she was found. Because in the end, that's what mattered most. She was lost. Then she was found. And the man who'd called himself Uncle Bob while hiding her murder died knowing that his 50-year lie had finally been exposed. That evil, no matter how well disguised as family love, eventually faces judgment.